Alright, in this video we're going to be going over this method numberOfLeapYears. The problem statement says, write the static method numberOfLeapYears, which returns the number of leap years between year 1 and year 2 inclusive. That means it includes year 1 and year 2. In order to calculate the value, this helper method isLeapYear is given to you. It returns true if it's a leap year, false otherwise. And you must use this isLeapYear method to receive full credit. Let's go ahead and get started with the pseudocode. I think this helps us to map out what we need to do within the problem. We know that this method will be returning this int that represents the number of leap years between year 1 and year 2. So we probably need to initialize some sort of variable that'll keep track of that. So create a counter for the number of leap years. Next, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to loop through the years between year 1 and year 2. So that means that we need to take a look at every single year that's in between that range. And we know that it's a range because we're told that year 1 is less than or equal to year 2. So we want to loop through those years. We want to look at each year by itself. And if the year is a loop year, increment the counter. And then once we get finished with all the years, once we take a look at year number 2, which should be the last year we're looking at, we can return the count for the number of leap years. Number of leap years between year 1 and year 2. And that should be about it for our pseudocode. So let's go ahead and jump into writing out this code. So creating a counter for the number of leap years. Since we're returning an int, this is probably going to be an int. So let's say int num leap years. And we can initialize this at 0. 0 is a good starting number for most counters because let's say they're the same year. Let's say they're both 1999. Between 1999 and 1999, there are 0 leap years. So if we went through that for loop, we would just return 0 because we wouldn't have found a single leap year. So it's a good starting number. So then we want to loop through the years between year 1 and year 2. So it kind of sounds like we can use year 1 and year 2 as the bounds of our for loop, right? So before, when we used to say something like int I equals 0, and then I is less than some number, I plus plus, instead, I think we should start off at int I equals year 1. So we don't really care about the 0th year. We only care about the year that's at our lower bound, which would be year 1. Then we want to keep going until we hit year 2 and also look at year 2. So it's inclusive. So if I just had this be I less than year 2, we would get to year 2 minus 1, but we wouldn't actually look at year 2. So put that equal sign there. And then since we want to look at every single year in between these two, we're going to do I plus plus, which means that we'll look at year 1, and then we'll look at year 1 plus 1, etc., etc. So that should be the bounds of our for loop. Now the logic inside of our for loop is we need to determine if the year is a loop year. Here we can use that helper method that is described in the problem statement, isLeapYear. So if isLeapYear, and we need to pass in a year here. And remember that we're using this I variable to keep track of what year we're currently looking at. So if I is a leap year, so this will either return true or false. So we can, if we did something like this, it would be a little bit redundant because isLeapYear returns a Boolean. So this is the same thing, and it's a little bit cleaner. So if it is a leap year, then we want to increment our counter, num leap years plus plus, and then we keep doing that until we reach year 2. We look at year 2, we exit that for loop, then we want to return the count. So this would be return num leap years. And that is all the code for this problem. So there's no example within the problem statement, so I'm going to go ahead and create one for us. So I'm going to say that the numbers that are being passed in here are 1999 and let's say 2004. So the years that we're going to be looking at are 1999, 2000, 2001, start a new, 2002, 2003, and 2004. So we create that counter. So at this point, num leap years is 0. We set up our for loop. So I equals 1999. Is 1999 less than or equal to 2004? Yes, it is. So we go inside of our for loop. Is 1999 a loop year? Unfortunately, it is not. So we don't increment num leap years. We go back to the top of the for loop. We increment I. Now it's 2000. 2000 is a leap year, so we would now set num leap years equal to 1. Then we go back up top, 2001. 2001 is not a leap year, so we do not increment our leap years variable. We move on to 2002. 2002, also not a leap year, incremented again. 2003, 2003, sadly not a leap year. 2004, 2004 is a leap year, so we would increment our leap years. We would say it is a leap year, so this returns true. We go inside of the logic there. We increment leap years, so now it's 2. Now, when we increment this number, however, we no longer see that it's less than or equal to 2004, so we exit the for loop, and we would return leap years, which would be 2. Between 1999 and 2004 inclusive, so that's including 1999 and 2004, we only have 2 leap years. And if we look at a list of the number of leap years in that range, we would see that we are absolutely correct. We do only have 2 leap years here. If we get rid of all the pseudocode, here is what our number of leap years method looks like, where we're initializing that counter. We're looping from year 1 to year 2. We're checking if every year in between those inclusive is a leap year and incrementing that counter if it is, and then we're returning the number of leap years. Hopefully that helps you out. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below and I'll get back to you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.